name is Brandy. I am part of the team here at Overcome Media. I'm here to share my testimony to spread light to those that are in darkness or surrounded in darkness or, are afraid to come to God or to Jesus. Um, I grew up in a single parent home with my father and my two older brothers. Um, Grew up in a small town out in Brighton. That's where all my dad's side of the family's from. So grew up out there. Um, I was the only girl in the family, in the entire family, with all boys, cousins, uncles. I had my aunts, but I was the only girl. So I did everything that the boys did all the time. Um, I grew up, I would say a loving home. I wouldn't say it wasn't a loving home. Uh, um, at a very young age, I started drinking and partying and using drugs. My family, they were always, partying and always drinking in that sense. So to me, I just felt like that was life. That was normal. Growing up, seeing it, birthday parties, any sort of an occasion, it was always just drinking. So I just thought that's the way that you lived. Uh, Growing up, I went to church with my grandmother. She is a Christian woman. She would always want to bring me to church, and I did enjoy going and doing that with her. I remember that being a big part of my childhood with her. Um, I wouldn't say the rest of my family, went to church. My grandfather, my father, not even my own mother went to church, but I do remember always going with my grandmother, and I enjoyed it. I felt like back then I probably didn't understand the word of God. Um, you know, I would read it, but I don't feel like I understood really what it meant to me. But I do remember going and my grandma giving me, your dollar to tithe. I always remember that and being a part of the little plays that they always had. But I wouldn't say I really fully knew who God or Jesus was or understood the Christian faith or the lifestyle or anything of that. My grandma, she never cussed, she never drank. Um, I guess she smoked cigarettes with her with her sisters, but I didn't know about that until my adult life. But I just always felt like my grandma was that saint. Um, uh, so I would say in high school I started, drinking and experimenting with drugs. I had an older brother, Luke, who is a year older than me. So pretty much everything that he did, I did with him. And even if he wanted to stop me, he wouldn't be able to because I was going to make my own choice and do what I wanted to do. During that time, I would say I'd started drinking probably like 13, 14, pretty young, just drinking. Not drinking like didn't know what I was doing. I just felt like you just drink and you would drink, and then I would get super drunk and end up passing out and missing everything. Missing the parties, missing just everything. Not knowing any better, just thinking that's just what you did at a party was just drink and drink and drink. Also in high school, my brother and we got into going to raves. That was like a big part of our high school years. Us and a lot of our friends. It was, every couple months you would go to that big rave and you would go and, you know, I would say back then times in the, I mean, obviously drugs are bad, but I would say back then they weren't as, always dangerous, but not as how they are now, how a lot of things are laced with fentanyl now. So back then during that time, we would, just be going to these raves, and my brother would, buy some pills like ecstasy and Molly and all that prior to going in. But there's times that you would just buy them from some random drug dealer there at the rave. And, back then I didn't realize how reckless and scary and dangerous that could have been to me, a 14, 15-year-old girl, like getting drugged and not knowing it. I could have overdosed. There could have been a lot of times where like things could have gone bad and just not knowing any better and having that lack of knowledge and wisdom and not fully having, a sense of someone giving me like guidance or a good wisdom, Um, Not that my parents weren't that way, but just, I should have had something that would have, like, hey, do you think that's the right choice? Do you think that's the safest for you? Instead of just, indulging into this party lifestyle at such a young age. And me growing up in that lifestyle and like of partying and stuff like that, I just thought that was normal. I thought that was life. I thought that's just how, you lived your life as an adult. And so yeah, so me and my brother Luke, we did a lot of our partying together, being a year apart. Um, he was my older brother that he said, okay, well, if I can't stop you, then I'm going to be with you. So he always made sure I was safe and always made sure nobody had messed with me and always took care of me, always watched out for me. And he would pretty much check anybody who would try to cause me harm or try to give me more than what I should have had, and he would get upset and definitely like take things into his own hands and separate me from those people and just always made sure I was for the most part safe during those times. Um so yeah, during high school we did a lot of the raves and stuff like that, being careless, not knowing any better. Following that, then, we went into the club phase where we were getting into the clubs downtown. We thought we were cool coming from this small town and coming into the big city of Denver and going to these major clubs like Beta. I mean, I don't think Beta is around anymore, but we used to go to Beta a lot and the club church. And we always thought we were cool if we had me, I had a fake ID back then because I was younger than everybody. So I had to have a fake ID to get into these clubs. And then if they didn't give you the big X's on your hands and you were able to drink, you just thought you were cool. And honestly, when I look back at it, I don't think that's cool at all. But, here I am. It's made me who I am today. So, yeah, just living that fast lifestyle, wanting to be in the scene, wanting to be seen, wanting to, come from this small town and, try to be in the part of the big city and everything that it has to offer in that kind of sense. After the club phase died down, my brother and I, and, the group of friends that we had hung out with and grew up with, not all of them, but most of them, we started getting high on oxycodone 30s. That's what we had called blues back then. Uh, first it was just once in a life or, a couple times a week, just, sniffing them and how it made you feel. And then eventually we all went to smoking them on foil. Uh, During that time, you know, I I wasn't, I wasn't thinking obviously because I was so clouded up by everything that I didn't realize how, I heard that people say, um, painkillers are addicting, and I didn't realize it until I was in a full-blown drug addiction. I became fully addicted to them. Was doing everything I could to try and, support my high. At that time, I was working as a CNA, which, you know, uh it wasn't like great money, but I felt like it was enough for, 18-year-old girl to survive off of. But considering the fact I was in a full-blown drug addiction, it wasn't enough. I At that time I was getting myself into debt, a lot of debt. I started to get payday loans and not paying them back. So I didn't realize the consequences of that would lead to me like ruining my credit for, wanting to build a future for myself that was already going down the drain. I I was getting the payday loans. I was overdrafting my bank account. So every time I'd overdraft my bank account and then I would get paid every 2 weeks, it was like my check was already gone. because it would, pay the overdraft fees, but then, I was still either negative or just right at it, and I would just overdraft my account again. At that point, I was going through different banks to get a bank and write checks to myself or to friends in order to get high. I eventually, after the bank situations, because I went through a few banks, after that had happened, I was, still out of money, still in this drug addiction. How am I gonna support this habit? Because I was heavily addicted. If I didn't have it, I was sick. I was in a withdrawal. I was, having cold sweats. I was irritable. I was, I was not trying to feel like that, and I was trying to do anything to make myself feel better. During that time, the same group of friends and my brother and I, we went down the path of, going into stores and stealing. Um, I never stole from my family, but I would steal from stores and stuff like that. I would go in to certain like big stores and I would come out with, anything that I could that was worth the value, whether it would be a TV, whether it be a new computer, whatever I could get my hands on. And then that led to me, taking it to the pawn shops and constantly in and out the pawn shops to sell things, whatever, we could get our hands on to support that addiction. A lot of my friends at that time had gotten in trouble for stealing. Um, for some reason, I just had never gotten caught. Um, One time I almost did get caught, and I ended up getting away, thankfully, and not getting in trouble. Um, so yeah, that's how that went. After, a lot of friends were getting in trouble for stealing, and the stores were starting to realize what people were doing, it was becoming harder to do that. At the time, my brother was dating a dancer. She worked at the clubs here in Denver. She, well, she was a stripper. Was living with her at the time, and I was just tired of, you know, working my job and not having any money. And then the stealing wasn't obviously, a good option. So I had asked her to introduce me into that lifestyle of dancing. I was 19 when I first started. I was, I wouldn't necessarily say I was scared. I just didn't know what I was doing. Um, and at that time, I was so clouded up that I was just trying to support this addiction. And I would see these girls come home with money, and I was like, I need to support this addiction. And my thought process, I thought was, well, I'll dance, I'll pay back these loans, I'll get my life right, this will help me. And that wasn't the case at all. I ended up just going harder into the drugs. I obviously was having making more money. So I was just getting high the whole time, just getting high, working my jobs. I'd work the clubs at night and then I would go work my CNA job during the day. Sometimes I wouldn't even go home. I would just go straight to the nursing home and sleep for a few hours in my car and then wake up and go right into the nursing home. I just remember that time being really such a blur to me. It was really a blur. I think because I was living like so fast of a lifestyle that it was just really like a clouded time for me back then. I remember it, but I don't in a sense. I So around that time I had met so I danced for about almost about a year, and then I had met my oldest son's dad. He was a drug dealer in Brighton. I think I had gotten some pills from him. Well, originally it started, that relationship. I had gotten some pills from him. He had given them to me for a deal. And then he ended up introducing me to heroin. At that time, I didn't like to think that it was heroin in a sense because I was like, it's just a pure form of opium. It's just a pure form of the pill, and not realizing that, I mean, obviously it was cheaper. You get more for your money. It's a better, like, it's a better high, stronger high, I would say. And at that time, I went into a full blown heroin addiction. Um, Probably 6 months into our relationship, I ended up getting pregnant with our son, SJ. And at that time, you know, he he wasn't selling drugs anymore. He was more doing the drugs. So he ended up having to get, some little side jobs because we were about to have this baby and we're preparing to have this baby. And, you know, I could say I'm really thankful for his parents at that time because we had lived with them. And we had like, I wouldn't say full on support, but we had support from them where we lived with them and we didn't have to worry about, paying rent and you know, paying bills and stuff like that. So really, relied on them at that time. Uh so during that time that I was pregnant, my brother Luke had, tried to get sober and everything. And I was uh I was 36 weeks pregnant, and I ended up my son's dad, he was working this nighttime job. He would work in the evening. I think he would start at like 7 or 8 and wouldn't get off until like 2 or 3 in the morning. The day before the day before my brother had asked me to come over, hang out with him. And I told him, I am pregnant right now. I'm cleaning the house. I was more nesting, trying to get ready to have my son. And I told him, I'll just see you tomorrow. My son's dad came home from work, and then it was probably about 3:30 in the morning. My oldest brother, Jesse, had called me, and I didn't answer him because I was just like, "Oh, I'm not gonna answer him. Like, what does he want?" I figured it had to do with, either drugs or something of that sense. And I heard his voicemail, and I remember it's clear as day that he was just crying. And my older brother, he doesn't ever really cry. And he doesn't ever really cry. And so I remember him calling and saying, Brandy, you need to call me. If something bad's happened, please call me. So I call it. And that's when he had told me that our brother Luke had overdosed. And I just remember saying, no, 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 no. Like, I just talked to him. I just talked to him a few hours ago. Like, it's not true. It's not true. And he was like, yeah, it's true. He's like, I've tried giving him CPR and everything. And he's like, he's gone. So at that time, we rushed to my dad's house, and it was true. It was, huge heartbreak in my life. Um, Months leading up to my brother passing, me and my oldest brother were upset with our brother Luke just because of, the lifestyle. And he would steal our stuff from us and go pawn it and take our money. And so we were, giving him, we thought, tough love, or like, holding unforgiveness and resentment in our heart. And I'm glad to say, like, weeks leading up to my brother's death, I had forgiven him. I did hold a lot of guilt for a long time that I was ugly to my brother during those months prior. And I held a lot of guilt for a long time for that because we were always close, And I just thought, oh, I'm gonna, teach him a lesson. And it's never good to do that. It's always good to forgive people. Always good to forgive. Uh, so I ended up having my son 2 weeks later at 38 weeks. Uh, you would think at that time that because of losing my brother, that it would make me, want to stay clean and, you know, live this life with my son, but that wasn't the case. I ended up relapsing full blown back into a heroin addiction. I you know, I didn't care. I didn't care. I was hurt, I was sad, I was broken. I held like I said, I held a lot of guilt in my heart for that. Um, and so during that time, I went full back into a drug addiction. I don't even think I think it was about a month after I had my son, like 4 or 5 weeks, probably about 5 weeks. I ended up getting back into dancing. I was working around all the clubs in Denver. I, very thankful for my son's grandparents at the time. They helped me a lot. They helped me a lot raise my son, help take care of him while I was working and stuff like that. Um, and yeah, just living that fast lifestyle, just bouncing around from club to club, working, a day shift, working an evening shift, and then going working the after hours. I worked with a lot of girls, that, shared a lot of um, similar things, either with addiction, with losing somebody, or growing up in a broken home. You know, I felt like there's a lot of, girls around me that we all shared the same sort of brokenness and hurtness. And just living that lifestyle was just empty. It was really empty. I didn't I couldn't even tell you where all that money went. Well, I could. It went to drugs. It's not like I used any of that money for anything other than drugs and to support my family at that time. I was supporting to mine and my son's dad drug addictions and, trying to support this baby. And I would have to say, fast forward 3 years, I remember looking at my son and I'm still getting high off heroin, still smoking a foil. I uh I just remember at that time like crying out a lot, crying out to God, praying for him to take this addiction away from me, that I didn't want to live this lifestyle anymore. Um I I remember my son's grandmother, I had asked her for some money one time, few times, more than once, few times. And I remember she would always tell me to pray. And I would just be like, "Pray, like, what do you mean pray? Like, I need money. Like, I'm not working tonight. I'll pay you back tomorrow." And she'd always just tell me, "Mija, just pray, just pray." And, I remember like being like trying to come off and then just going through withdrawals and praying out to God to deliver me from this addiction, that I didn't want this for my son, that you know, um, coming from the life of like addicts and stuff like that, and having that in my genes, that I knew that it was in my son's genes. And I didn't want this for him. He was 3. He was coming to the, point of like comprehending, you know, and I didn't want that for him. And praying really is what helped me. I remember crying and praying out to God, like, if you're real, if you're really real, God, then show me you're real. Show me. Help me. Help me come out of this. Help me for my son, not for me, but for him. He don't deserve this. You blessed me with this beautiful baby boy, and look what I'm doing. And at that time, I remember I feel God come in and just tell me, like, just trust me. Whatever it takes, just trust me. At that time, I had left that relationship and got into another relationship with my husband now. And I remember I was still getting high, but like I was lowering my tolerance. And I remember I wanted to tell him, but I didn't know how to tell him. Not that I felt like he would judge me or anything like that, but I just couldn't tell him. I couldn't get the courage enough to tell him. One morning, and something ended up happening, and I ended up having to tell him the truth. Um, Told him what happened, told him that, I'm in a heroin addict, that I'm addicted, and that I need help. And I remember him asking me, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I told him, like, I want to get clean. I don't want to live this life anymore. So on February 13th, 2018, I made the decision to fully quit doing heroin and all drugs and will give my life to God. I remember telling him that because he, would talk about God to me all the time. And I told him I didn't want to live this life. I want to give my life to God and I want to get sober. So he took me to my mom's house. My mom had taken me to Porter Hospital here in Denver. And that's when I, made the first step to getting clean. I remember um I remember going through withdrawals. It's really bad for about 2 weeks. Hallucinating. I remember seeing like black stuff coming off my skin. I felt like it was like all the heroin I'd smoked coming off of me. I remember uh just fully being out of it. Like 1 minute I was in it and then the next I was passed out. I could have been from, the drugs that they had given me, the pharmaceutical drugs to get off of it to help me. And then about 2 weeks, I quit the drugs that they had given me, that the doctors had given me. And from then, I just been living more and more in my life for God, to be more like Him, to live this godly life for not only for myself, but for my children and for those around me, just to be a better woman, to be a better mother, to be a better wife. And I'm not ashamed of who I am, of my past, of being a stripper, being a heroin addict. I will tell anybody. I'm not afraid. And it's made me who I am today for me to share my testimony, to share this with girls and women that I still know that are still in that lifestyle, or those that I don't know. And I just thank God. I give God and my Savior Jesus Christ all the glory and all the honor because I couldn't do it alone. I know I couldn't do it alone. I know I need that external strength to um to get me through and to not, relapse and go back.
Is there one thing you would give as a piece of advice to a girl right now that's in a similar situation that you were in back then, feeling hopeless and lost, and wanting help? What would be your advice to her to get her to get to know the Lord?
I would say pray. Like my son's grandma told me to pray and to seek the Lord, that he is there and that you can find him, that there is hope, that there's resources, there's people there to help you. And I would say, yeah, to pray and to seek God and to get a Bible, to start praying for it to minister to you, even if you don't understand what it's saying. And yeah, that there's hope for you and that you can do it, and that Jesus loves you so much and he can give you the strength to overcome anything.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
When I feel like I'm